Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News. Tips for taxpayers who need to file an amended return. IRS Tax Tip 2020-114, September 3rd, 2020. The IRS will correct common errors during processing. However, there are certain situations in which a taxpayer may need to file an amended return to make a correction. There's a link to the amended return here. Taxpayers can now file some amended electronically, so some of the times when you file the amended returns going forward, you may be able to file them electronically. That's going to be a new type of thing that happened fairly recently. It's one of the last type of forms, or the last forms, that the IRS has been able to pull away from a paper filing necessity to an online filing necessity, so that could make things easier, although there is a cutoff date as to when you can do that for the electronic filing. So here are some tips for anyone who discovers they make a mistake or forgot to include something on their tax return. So note that if you miss something on the tax return, if you look at it, you say, oh man, there's something that's wrong on the tax return. The question is, do you need to file then an amended return? Now note that the IRS will be processing the returns, and when they pick up an error, they will basically often make the correction. And oftentimes the errors that the IRS will be picking up is, say you forgot like a 1099 that had some interest on it or something from a bank or something that you didn't have, or you didn't know about, or you just forgot about it and you had some interest. The IRS will probably pick that up because that 1099 will then be given to the IRS, and the IRS will most likely then correct the return automatically. They can do that basically electronically at this point because they have that information. They have the 1099, and they'll probably adjust it, and then they'll send you a letter most likely saying, hey, you missed this 1099 and we think that you owe us more money based on it. And if they're correct, and in that case they would be, then you'd say, all right, I'll pay you the more money, and you may not need the amendment in that case. Although now there's some kind of things, however, that the IRS wouldn't know about, of course, so they wouldn't be able to pick something like that up. So the question and something like that might be something like a deduction on the Schedule C or Schedule A type of deduction, something that's not supported by like a W-2 or 1099. Then the IRS won't have that information, and then the correction would need to be made basically by an amended return so that the IRS can pick that up. So the question then oftentimes is, if you see something that's wrong, if you got some documentation in after the fact, or if you realize that you missed something, do you need to file an amended return or not, is often the question. And one of the things you might consider is, well, will the IRS be able to process this and pick this up basically just with the automated system? And one of the ways you think about that is whether or not this is something linked directly to a form that the IRS has, 1099s, W-2s, that they will most likely possibly make an automatic correction for you. Now, even if they do make that correction, however, you still want to make sure that in your system you have that correction in place so that when you go to your tax preparer, they are aware of it, because any kind of rollovers or anything that happened in the prior year could roll over to the following year, and they might need that information for the tax preparation of the following year. Okay, back to the text. Use the interactive tax assistant. Taxpayers can use the "Should I file an amended return?" There's a link to that here to help determine if they should file an amended return. So there's a link to that here. So if you're in this situation and want to go through kind of the question answers from the IRS and use their tool, there's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description. Don't amend for math errors or missing forms. So once again, don't amend for math errors or missing forms. Taxpayers generally don't need to file an amended return to correct math errors or on their original return. The IRS may correct math or clerical errors on a return and may accept it even if the taxpayer forgot to attach certain tax forms or schedules. The IRS will mail a letter to the taxpayer if necessary, requesting additional information. So if it's a math error that's going to be on there, if you filed the form basically by hand, if you have the software, then you shouldn't have a math error. Hopefully the software will be picking up any of the math errors. But if you filed it by hand, then again, the system within the IRS's processing system can basically electronically figure out that problem, and they may be able to do that electronically and kind of pick that error up and be able to make the necessary corrections for it. So most likely you may not need to make any adjustments if there's a math error. What you want to do is see, in that situation, you might want to see whether the return gets processed and then when they pick it up, see if they pick it up or not. Most likely they will, and then you'll be able to see that if you get a refund or after they process the return. And if they pick it up, then you don't have to go through the pain of making an amended return. So, which could confuse the situation. If the IRS was going to pick it up anyways, then filing an amended return might confuse the IRS. And again, you don't want to confuse the IRS. That can lead to problems. So wait until receiving a refund for tax year 2019 before filing. Taxpayers who are due refunds from their original tax year 2019 tax return should wait for the IRS to process the return and they receive the refund before filing a 1040X to claim an additional refund. So if you're getting a refund, their suggestion is, hey, why don't you just wait until we process the return? And that way, if there's something on there that needs correction and you know it needs correction, then you can see if they're going to pick it up or not. You can see if they're going to have any adjustment to it, and then they'll send you the refund on it. And due to the fact that you're dealing with something that is a refund, it should not result in further penalties and interests because it's a situation where the IRS basically owes you money, which they're not going to charge you penalties and interest on. It gets a little bit more concerning if it's something that could result in a tax payment or tax payment due, because then the concern is that you'd like to correct it in order to maybe possibly reduce the amount of penalties and interest. So then timing becomes more important at that point in time. Although obviously if you want the refund and if it's going to increase the refund, timing might be important to you because you'd like your refund quicker. But you may not be subject to more penalties and interest in that case. So they're suggesting wait till you get the refund, and then you can analyze the situation to see if they picked anything up and then determine whether you not need to file an amended return to correct something that has not been picked up. If you owe money, then again, it could become more urgent to do the 1040X, the amended return, because if you don't, then you could have some more penalties and interest related to the late payments on it. So back to the text. File Form 1040X to amend. Taxpayers must file using Form 1040X amended U.S. individual income tax return. So if you're going to amend the return, and you typically have like a 3-year period to do this, to amend it under normal statute of limitations kind of conditions, you typically want to think about amending it within the 3-year period, and obviously waiting until you receive a refund if you're due one will fall well within that window. And if you need to correct it at that point, then the IRS has already processed the return, and then you can send in the 1040X and they don't get mixed up, on the processing as they process, and they get a new form in that's going to change things. Okay, so there's a link to the Form 1040X to correct their tax return. If they are filing an amended 1040 or 1040SR for 2019, they can now file electronically using commercial tax filing software. So that's going to be the big new thing. If it's for 2019 and going forward, the IRS now has the electronic option. If it's anything before that point in time, you still got to do the paper filing for the 1040X, which is not fun. It's not as easy of a process. So it's really, I'm not sure how easy. I haven't actually filed a 1040X yet under the electronic filing. I filed ones under the paper filing, and it's not as streamlined as it could be. So hopefully, I'm assuming at this point in time, it's a lot easier now for the 2019 amended tax returns and hopefully going forward. So all other amended returns must still be mailed to the IRS. When filing, taxpayers should indicate the year of the original return and explain all changes made by attaching any forms or schedules. Taxpayers then sign and mail the Form 1040X to the address listed in the instructions. The taxpayers filing Form 1040X in response to an IRS letter should mail it to the address shown on the letter. So if you do get a letter that you're responding to, then it will have the address on it and you want to respond to that letter. So amend to correct errors. Taxpayers should correct the return if they find that they should have claimed a different filing status or don't report some income. So those are going to be the common two kind of things that you would want to have. If you have the filing status that is incorrect, the IRS is less likely to pick up a filing status error like married, single, and whatnot. And if you're missing income, then that's going to lower well, that's going to lower your refund, or it's going to result in more taxes. So they're saying if you missed the income on there, then you should file the amended return. Again, the IRS might pick it up sometimes, because they might pick it up if it's like a 1099 interest or something like that. They would have gotten that. And if you didn't record 1099 interest or dividends or something like that, they'll probably pick that up. But again, that will increase the tax due, which could result in if you owe money, it could result in some penalties and interest if you pay it later. So filing earlier to reduce the amount of tax that is owed could be more of an urgent thing to remove, penalties and interest before they process the return. So taxpayers who claimed a deductions for credits, they shouldn't have claimed, or didn't claim deductions or credits they could have claimed, may need to file an amended return. So the credits, of course, are again a little bit more complicated. They typically have a few more things involved than just simply a 1099 or W-2 form. The IRS won't, just be able to pick that up just with the documentation on it. They're typically going to need an amended return in order to pick those up. So changes made on the federal return may also affect state taxes. The taxpayer should contact the state tax agency to see if this is so. So note that when you're thinking about adjusting the taxes, you got the federal, and then whatever state you are at, you're going to have the same kind of issues, or possibly depending on the tax requirements of the state. So then you're going to have to, if you need to amend something, you got to think, okay, what state am I in? Is it going to amend the state tax return? Do I have an equivalent state amended form that I'm going to have to fill out for the state as well? So pay additional tax. The taxpayers who will owe more tax should file Form 1040X and pay the tax as soon as possible to avoid penalties and interest. So notice when you owe money, the 1040X becomes a little bit more of a priority in order to avoid the penalties and interest that could accumulate if you have a late payment on it. So they should consider using IRS Direct Pay. There's a link to that here, to pay any tax directly from the checking or saving account for free. File within 3-year time limit. So here's that time limit, basically the statute of limitations. So you got like the 3 years typically to amend or to file. So taxpayers generally have 3 years from the date they filed their original tax return to file Form 1040X to claim a refund. They can file it within 2 years of the date they paid the tax if that date is later. So use separate forms if amending more than one tax year. Taxpayers must file and submit a separate Form 1040X for each tax year to avoid confusion. So if you're amending, multiple tax years, you discovered you had this error that you did, multiple times. You can't just, put them on one 1040X and be like, here's 3 years worth of changes. They want a different amended return for each year. So they should check the box for the calendar year or enter the other calendar year or fiscal year they are amending. The form's instructions have the mailing address for the amended return. Track amended return status online. Taxpayers can track status of their amended return in English and Spanish using Where's My Amended Return? There's a link to that here. Amended returns take up to 16 weeks to process and up to 3 weeks from the date of mailing to show up in the system. So they can take some time to process the amended return. Before that time, there's no need to call the IRS unless the tool specifically tells the taxpayers to do so. So obviously the IRS is trying to say, don't call us, right? But you can get it all from the website. So, but you could call them in the case of if you need to. But the idea being that they're going to have all this stuff on the website, and you should be able to track the amended return in a similar way as your standard return.